Hey everyone, welcome back to SDRescue. It is episode 18, and today I'm joined once again by Grayson Fulbright, and today we are swapping places. Grayson, why should the people listen today?
Well, today we're getting a different perspective. We're going to be going over an email
Hey everyone,
topic that
welcome
we've
back
reviewed
to
before,
SDRescue.
which
It is
is
episode
talking
18.
about events, trying to get your prospects or strategic people in your network to either attend or get involved with an event that you're hosting. And the reason why everyone should listen is because for the first time on SDRescue, we're going to be diving into a rewrite provided by Mr. Austin Fuller, my co-host. So really excited to dive into this and talk about what you've got here, Austin.
Awesome. Yeah. So I realized I actually had the live stream up in the background here. So apologize for anybody that saw that. What I'm going to do now, I just had to reopen my Google Doc. So we will jump right back into the stream now. If you just give me like 20 seconds, we'll get into the email. All right. So this is, I think this is really important because guess what? Webinars aren't going away. If you're an SDR and if you asked any marketing manager or sales leader or even somebody who's an SDR, what are your companies doing right now to market? If your company's not doing webinars, I don't know, then you must have some really rock solid lead generation strategy outside of that, because everybody and their brother I know is doing webinars. It's actually gotten super competitive. And so you're going to be getting more and more webinar attendee leads to nurture or convert. And so I just want to go over this because this email is one of the cardinal sins, I think, of not understanding where a buyer is. And Grayson talks about this a lot, where if you make an assumption about where the buyer is and they're in the buying process and they're not there, you can easily offend them, right? Assumptions are dangerous. And unfortunately, I know this may not be the SDR's fault. This may be a sales management thing where they're like, hey, here's a list of leads, squeeze as many meetings out of these webinar leads as you can. So I'm sorry if you're in that situation, but I'm going to, I really want to demonstrate a couple of different ways and approaches we can use to convert these leads other than just asking for a meeting right out the bat. So here's the original email I got after attending a really good webinar, actually. Very, very good. Hi, Austin. I want to personally reach out and make sure you got the recording for this webinar. It's now more important than ever to find ways to reach your prospects in the most memorable and meaningful ways possible. We hope our panelists' insights provided the inspiration that you might need to close out the year strong. Our company is the most effective way to book meetings and close deals with personalized gifts that make it easy to build stronger, deeper, and more trusted relationships. I'd love to schedule a time for us to chat about how our company could help you drive more revenue. All right, Grayson, what's your initial reaction off of that email?
Yeah, so before I start, it looks like I might be having Wi-Fi trouble. So can everyone hear me? Austin, can you hear me here?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, cool. So big picture feedback. I think we talked about structure in one of our more recent episodes, and I think we're going to go back to school here when it comes to structuring a conversation, because I think this email is not the worst, but I feel like given the context that you attended their webinar, so you've already kind of given a buy-in that, hey, I know what your organization is and I'm interested in checking out what you're doing. Given that context, I feel like they had so much leverage they could have included in the email, or different angles that they could have taken to accelerate the conversation. And my initial reaction here is this kind of comes off to me like a cold email trying to get me to attend the webinar, which you attended the webinar already. And so I think that's my big picture feedback, is you can tell that this person either didn't do a lot of personalization for this email, or it was kind of already templated within some sort of sequence, because I just feel like the framing is off. It kind of like the first sentence is only focused on, hey, I want to make sure that you get the webinar title, because obviously that's the best way that they're getting opens. It's probably one of the only ways that they're getting people to open with this. And then they go into a pitch. And to me, that sounds like two different emails, two different email topics. And the big thing I'm seeing here is how do you mesh these two together of, hey, you attended our webinar and I wanted to add more value to you, but at the same time, I'm going to talk about my product and try to get a meeting. You got to make those work together. You can't just mash them together and say, here you go. What do you think?
Yes, I agree. So I think that's actually really interesting because the structure of this email, it does. So you want to know what happened? Is I have categories. So I save all sorts of types of prospecting emails. I put this in the cold email one. It took me rereading it to understand that this was a webinar invite. It's super funny, right? Like I was like, wait a second. I copied and pasted in there, and it wasn't until I copied and pasted the email and reread it to realize that this was the recording to the webinar. And that I had attended this. I watched this webinar live. It was so crazy to me. So when you said this actually hits me like a cold email, it hit me like a cold email. I saw it. I scanned it and was like, oh yeah, this is a cold email. And I put it in my cold email folder because what I do is I don't really read the first line all the time. I typically jump to the call to action. And if it says 15 minutes on your calendar, I typically just put it right in the cold email folder. That I save for these shows and things like that, and because I really didn't think that anybody would just send get 15 minutes on your calendar. Thanks for here's the recording to our webinar. Can I have 15 minutes, right? And they did a good job. So they did a thing. So I think there's a temptation like to kind of guilt somebody into, hey, I'm getting you the recording. Give me 15 minutes in exchange. I don't think that happens here, but. They do jump into they jump right into the typical explainer cold email in the second half of this email, and it's really hard. Like there's just a lot of orange, and so it's really hard to get out. It's like you said with structure. If your email is full of orange, it's really hard to get out of it when you're writing. If there's so much of you in the email, the email's it'll ultimately end up being all about you as opposed to about the buyer.
Yeah. And to kind of hop into the structure piece, I think one thing that could have fixed this is just tying the last two lines in this email to what you talked about in the top. I think this email would have been a killer, high converting email if it said everything on the top and said, hey, I wanted a person to reach out, blah, 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 blah. Here's the title. Now more than ever, things are important. We hope that the panelists, blah, 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 blah. Okay, set the stage. But don't just then skip randomly with no context or warning to just a bare bones pitch with your value prop and an ask for a meeting. Instead, you could use the webinar and maybe say, hey, we had a lot of panelists follow up with questions about X or Y or Z, or maybe, we got so many registrants to our webinar that we're following up with a survey to give the community some insight into what's going on. Any idea like that, but
yep.
Like just by tying some sort of next step to a webinar that they've already opted into. That's the important thing. They've already bought in to being like involved with your organization. And so tie the next steps to that. Don't make it seem like a sale. Make it seem like they're just getting more value in an overall positive experience with your company. And so you should want them thinking like, hey, I joined a webinar and look, now they're reaching out and they're getting me involved. They're making me feel like I'm a part of the community. They're adding continuous value. I think this email, it gets close, but because it just cuts straight to a value prop, it kind of loses that credibility. Anyone who was excited about the webinar, like you probably were, Austin, it loses credibility because you're like, oh, yeah, they gave me the recording, but they're really just here to pitch me. They're not here to get me more involved. They're not here to make the event more relevant or more evergreen. They're just here to pitch me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people are misunderstanding, and I actually don't think this is a rep problem. It could be. Maybe this rep had full autonomy over what they send. But do you know what this smells like? This smells like marketing leadership trying to squeeze justifiable ROI on an event. And I'll say why. Because this webinar was a webinar that was done with a partner. It was done through a partner organization, which typically means either, look, the best content I find are either webinars that are hosted solo organically or that have been partnered through companies like where I can follow the money. Most of the time it's when the panelists, right, where the money is obvious and not tied to the content, right? When the ROI of the webinar is not tied to the content, I find the content's a lot better, right? Because then you don't have to have this squeeze effect where it's like, okay, we gotta get people to convert, because if we don't, we wasted all that marketing spend on paying for this sponsored webinar. So reps, like I feel for you if you're in this position and leadership is squeezing it on you, because it's unfortunate. But also, like, guess what? Like Grayson said, all it takes is one or two minor tweaks and tying this whole thing together, and suddenly the email reads a bunch different. It's way better. And maybe we should do a rewrite of maybe we should revisit this email next week or something and have Grayson rewrite it, because my rewrites are way different. Grayson's a much better copywriter than I am. And staying more true to this, because I think a lot of people are going to be put in the position where they're like, hey, you have to send some variation of this sort of template. For those people, I think that would be really beneficial. But I just think that if you don't, it like you said, it violates the integrity of the content, because now I feel like it was just bait. If you're producing something valuable and giving it out, you're now a contributor to the community. But if all of the thing if your contribution has a hook stuck through it, now I see that you're not interested in contributing to the community and being a valuable partner. So I mean, I think like a company that does this pretty well is Gong. Gong's a good example. You guys talked about that in your show when you had Jake Dunlap on here. I think another good example of like a sales tech vendor or somebody that puts out, because Gong Labs puts out some really cool insights, right? Those are valuable. And there aren't any strings attached. You don't have to buy Gong to know what their analysis is of millions of sales calls. But you know, if you're putting out stuff that always has a hook attached, well, then are you really trying to build the community up? Are you trying to give us insights, or are you just trying to squeeze more leads? You know, and that, it kind of ruins it for me, right? That's a bitter taste.
Yeah, I think you draw a good conclusion here on a big difference in perspective and mindset that I think sales organizations have, where it's like, right here is a good example of what we've talked about before, where it's like over-focused on the outcome being they get a meeting, being blind to the situation, being blind to the unique person, and just narrowly focusing on the meeting. Whereas I think what buyers are really wanting is for conversations to take place, organic. That's conversations.
What I want. I'm a buyer. I want that.
They want organic conversations that they find relevant. Like even if you don't get like a multi-response chain going with a prospect, even if they just reach out and say, hey, good tip, or hey, thanks for sharing, that alone is steps above where a lot of SDRs are at when they're contacting these buyers. And so I want to go back to your point before we move on to the rewrite about like marketing's involvement in this. I think a lot of times when marketing and when sales leadership get together, they kind of get in this mindset where it's like, if things aren't already going well, if they aren't already growing pipeline, if they don't already have a pipeline to go through, they get in this realm where they're like, ooh, like, who are the closest audience members in our CRM that we can hit up right now to get enough meetings, to get enough opportunities to end the quarter. Yeah. I've seen this happen within organizations. It's very, very common for marketing departments to help work with sales leaders to grab some list based on some lead scoring triggers, like they downloaded this or attended the webinar or did that, and then they'll just blast them. They don't get touched by SDRs, because it's sales asking marketing for the contribution. And so it just ends up being this awful experience where they receive value from you as an org, but then instead of getting some genuine one-on-one touches, they get fronted by marketing, with marketing speak first and trying to get the meeting, and then they get hit up by an SDR. And I think instead, if you just focus on, hey, thanks for joining my webinar, here's this, here's that, like just offer ideas and things to get them more involved. It doesn't have to be big, but it does have to be relevant.
The biggest thing that I take away from these emails in breaking these down is how I think as a buyer. because guess what? That second paragraph is actually really relevant to me. I am trying to think of new ways. So this webinar was about creativity and prospecting methods and things like that. And I'm trying to think of creative ways to prospect. There aren't too many sales leaders that are like, no, I think everything that worked in 2017 and 18 and 19 is good. We'll keep doing that. There are very few. And that is a relevant conversation that I want to have, that I want to participate in. And we'll see in my rewrites, that's actually where I direct this, because this second paragraph in here is really relevant to me. Now, this first sentence is really relevant to me. The first sentence in this second line. It's now more important than ever to find ways to reach your prospects in the most memorable and meaningful ways possible. I want to talk to people about that. But I did not reply to this email.
Unfortunate.
I think that's the big takeaway for here. So how can we get people who want to have that conversation to reply? Couple of ways. So here's my first way that I rewrote. Hi, Austin. I want to I tried to rewrite as little as possible. I kept the whole first line the same. I was like, you know what? Throw it away. Great. Give them the recording. In my second there's 2 rewrites today, everyone. You get a 2 for Tuesday. It's Monday. But I was like, all right, I'm not going to even change that, because you know what? You can probably have that as first line and get away with it. Probably doesn't matter that much. So personally reach out, give you the webinar. Okay. I saw you're the director of sales at Newarks. You did something. Some firmographic thing. I'd like to feature you on our blog, on our company's blog. Would you be willing to have a 15 to 20 minute interview about how you plan on being more creative in your prospecting for 2021? There's a couple of reasons why I did this. First off, I'm probably going to reply to this. How do you think I ended up on this show? I got sent an email from AJ, one of the founding members of SD Revolution, because I downloaded something from Demand Drive, and it said, hey, by the way, would you like to contribute? And I said, yes. And now I'm here, right? So first off, Exhibit A is this show. Exhibit B. Here's another benefit. SDRs are always talking about how they don't have content. What do I post? What do I post? What do I post? I don't have any relevant industry knowledge. Great. Talk to your buyers. They do have relevant industry knowledge. So now, even if only one person out of your whole list of webinar leads says yes, you're going to have one video, 15, 20 minute video of relevant industry stuff. If 3 people say yes, now you have an hour of relevant industry content, and that can become like 12 posts. And if you get enough people, you can put together an article. Like, for example, for this one, if you got 3 or 4 people to respond and you had good questions and they were all different ideas, you could put out another article that says, the 15 most creative prospecting methods for 2021. Number 4 will shock you. Or whatever the BuzzFeed clickbait title is, right? But then that becomes another layer of content, and you could use that in another email. Be like, hey, I talked to this guy, who are sales leaders at companies in your sector or in similar industries, and they gave me I have 15 of the best prospecting ideas that they're using in their cadences in 2021. Would you like it? Right? And that's content that you produced off of your webinar people. You didn't have to go and get marketing to do it. Anyway, that's the strategy. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I love it. And the one thing I want to point out in this rewrite, this first one,
kids, go away
is
now.
The very end.
Go away.
We haven't seen this on the show before, and I think this is an interesting kind of take to share. But what Austin did here in this first rewrite that's so beautiful is he kind of did the opposite of what I tend to do in emails. I tend to be the guy that comes in, tells a story, transitions to some assumption I have and a pitch to see if they want to move forward. Here, he went from the bottom up and said, hey, I want to tell you about the webinar title and make some assumptions because I know you attended the webinar. I know that you're director of sales and value I want you on a company's blog. And then here's where it's key. His CTA is opening up a story. Austin is not telling them a story and saying, hey, I'm going to send this email so that you can read it about my thoughts on a topic. No. He's sending an email to a person, making them feel special and saying, hey, this topic could become a story that's focused on you, and I want to be the one that helps put it out there. Are you in? And I just wanted to say that is a very powerful way to set up next steps. He could have done what the previous email did and just said, hey, I saw that you're the director of sales at Newarks, and I'd like to feature you on Vendors Company blog. Let me know if you'd be available to talk. Done. But no, you went beyond that. And not only did you add value and show them what they would get out of it, but you painted a picture that they're going to care about, because they might be planning on how to be more creative in their prospecting process. Maybe that's something that not only would they want to get an interview about, but one thing we haven't talked about is inviting people for non-sales activities can still lead to sales opportunities.
Yes.
Someone taking a 15-minute interview nonchalantly to just talk about being creative and prospecting can turn into a conversation worth millions of dollars. It's all how you frame the experience between you and that buyer. So that's all I wanted to say really on this rewrite is I think he did a very good job of framing and packaging an amazing kind of like future vision for that buyer and yourself to take.
The other thing you said was spot on. Now, I don't know that I was totally as aware of the process as you've painted the picture to be, but so the other thing is, guys, friends, reps, do you think that in that 15 to 20 minute interview, when you're putting them on a pedestal, that they're going to be more transparent? So guess what? The gold mine for this rep, any sales rep in this company, would want to be how the sales leaders are thinking about re-engineering or re-engaging with buyers in their prospecting process. And sometimes later in their sales process, like that top email said. Are they going to be, they will tell you everything in that interview for a blog video post. They're going to tell you everything. They will not tell you everything when you bant them to death for 15 minutes. Right? You will find out 10 times the amount. You will get the people that say, yeah, look, and I'm not a qualified prospect for this company, but they would find that out in the interview really clearly. I mean, you will know, and it'll be so easy to transition because they're going to talk about the problems they face and like, oh, we're thinking about doing more of X or more of Y. And you don't even have, and the thing is that people love to jump on it when they hear that, go, oh, well, we do that. We do X and Y. We can help you with that. Guys, slow down. Like, relax. Right? Like that's the thing that happens here is just relax. And let it be fun. Go on a fun journey, right? It's kind of like dating. Anyway, because guess what? It's easy to say, oh, I am a potential spouse. We can get married. First or second date. You're not, I mean, sometimes that works. Like I got engaged to my wife after 2 weeks, so I'm a pretty poor example of this. But for most people, that is not the case. All right, let's go to rewrite 2 because this one's a little bit cheating because the call to action is different, right? I wanna give people value and like I want to rewrite this with a goal of, okay, so you're trying to get them in you're trying to get them into a meeting, into a sales process. Here we go. So here's my rewrite. Rewrite number 2. Hi, Austin. Are you evaluating the efficacy of your team's prospecting? Here's how you need to write something that's easy to read and say, apparently. Are you evaluating the efficacy of your team's prospecting sequences? After our webinar called this, I spoke with several sales leaders that attended and asked them which area of their sales process they were lacking creativity. And they all said the same thing, prospecting. If you're in the same boat, I'd like to send you the exact prospecting sequence I use that allows me to create about 30% more qualified opportunities than my teammates. Let me know if you think that would be helpful. P.S. Here's the recording of the webinar so you can share with your team. All right, Grayson, what do you think? I feel like this was a little bit more Grayson Fulbright style. I tried to feel like you.
Just about to say that it looks very Grayson-like with the lead with the question based on a good assumption, painting a story that has something to do with them, building the context that, hey, after our webinar, which we know they attended, so that's a good call there, and then transitioning to, and I think this is a good example of what the rewrite missed, but instead of just going straight into a pitch, like hard stop from sentence B to sentence C going into a pitch, Austin actually frames like why the webinar and why the topic about the webinar is relevant to his next steps that he's setting. And so that's why when he says, if you're in the same boat, that's a really good primer, because if anyone is lacking creativity, there has been no pitch yet. So they're not gonna have their guard up. They're gonna be like, oh, I am in the same boat. What's next? And then the next thing that they're gonna read is, I will send you value. That's how you do emails well. Is not making it a confrontational or awkward conversation that they don't want to have, but making it something that draws them in and makes them just feel like they're getting involved in a relationship, rather than it being they're getting pestered by like a tax collector. Because I feel like that's how a lot of sales reps treat buyers nowadays.
Yeah, and if you look like, so people will say, well, Austin, you're using assumptions. Right, I am. I'm using assumptions to get people. If I'm going to squeeze, look, if you're going to give me a list of webinar leads and say, hey, get the ones that are in, and get the ones that are out, I'm going to use assumptions that the people that are in should have, and the ones that, should be out will not have. So, for example, if they jumped on the webinar to become more creative about how they can close deals, that's really not something that this company's product or service does, right? And so I don't want to say, hey, are you evaluating how you can make more creative slide decks? No. Are you evaluating the efficacy of your team's prospecting sequences? Do you want to be more creative at prospecting? Well, guess what? And SDRs, guess what? If you or someone in marketing or somebody isn't interviewing people who attend your webinars, I think you're missing out, right? Go and ask people, and I don't mean like sending on a scale of 1 to 5, how did you feel it was? I mean like, give them a phone call and say, hey, I just wanted to say thank you for attending the webinar. And have thoughtful questions. I don't have any in my head, but have thoughtful questions that would get some good responses and elicit good feedback. Not just like, how did you think it was? You can ask that one, I guess, or how can we improve? No. Ask good, thoughtful questions and get that feedback. Because guess what? If people are saying, oh, like one of the best questions would be like, what interested you about creativity in the sales process? Oh, well, we want to get better at prospecting. I would imagine that's a lot of them. That's me. And that's what I meant earlier when I said, hey, I really want to have this conversation. I want to have the conversation. You need to have, if marketing's not doing it, if your VP of sales isn't doing it, then you as the SDR got to do it. Like call them up and say, hey, or something like this. Are you evaluating how effective prospecting sequences are? And the other thing about this email that I really like is like, hey, guess what? If a rep had the panache to send me an email and said, hey, are you looking to get better at prospecting? I'm going to slide you my sequence. Right? You want to see what I do? I get 30% more meetings than my teammates. If somebody had the panache to say, hey, you're in sales, I'm in sales. Have a look. How does this sound? No, I immediately respect that person. I immediately respect that person because it's valuable, right? Because then I know, oh, this is a guy, I can chop it up with this person. Doesn't have to be a guy, it can be a girl. This girl or guy, whoever you are, I don't care. I'm like, man, this rep, I can chop it up with this rep. We can talk the talk. Now guess what? Our titles might be sales development rep and director of sales, but in my eyes, we're right here. You're a peer, right? That's the difference. And now I know how to do it really well with sales because I'm a sales leader, but guess what? It works with other industries too. You could do this for a variety of things, like for whatever there's always going to be problems that surround the problem your product or service solves, right? People don't buy your stuff because it does X. People buy your stuff because doing X will fix something in their business that they don't like. So I think if you can have more conversations around the problems that X is causing, then you're going to be seen as a peer.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I think to kind of cap off this eval, these rewrites, I'd say just remember where your standing is with buyers when you're reaching out, because there are plenty of cold leads who have no idea who you are, who have never seen your company before, and who are receiving communications for the first time. But this is an example that we're looking at of what I think is a missed opportunity, because this was a person who actually followed through on something marketing set up to support you with. If you're an SDR, these webinars, these things that marketing hosts, they're here to generate leads and generate exposure for you. And so I just feel like this is a good example of when you have content or when marketing is producing assets for you to use, make sure you use them in the email. Don't just mention it. Make it a story, make it an experience that goes beyond the event and potentially leads into an actual productive sales conversation.
Yeah, and I think even my PS, right? So we're going to wrap up here, but even my PS is, hey, here's, because before they're like, hey, thanks for attending the webinar. Here's the recording. I don't even bother with that. I give them a reason for why I'm giving it to them. Hey, here's the recording so you can share with your team, right? You're always give a frame what you do as a value add. Like otherwise you're missing value, right? Because they might not, I share a lot of stuff with my team. We have our team meetings. I assign a piece of content from somewhere on the internet for the team to review, and we talk about it in our team meetings every week. And then we go and then the team meeting is spent workshopping and building and boiling out, and we leave the meeting with something new that everyone can take with them and go and try from the content. And so, like, I don't know, that I just thought that there's just a lot of things that we can do better if we get a webinar lead, right? Than just simply explaining and pitch.
Right.
So it's 12 o'clock, my friends. Thank you for joining us. I think we should wrap up here. Please follow SD Revolution on LinkedIn. Subscribe to the YouTube channel to hit the little bell to get notifications. We go live here every single Monday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Follow us on LinkedIn. When I say us, I mean me and Grayson. Send us your emails. Send us problems you're having. We'd love to evaluate them, rewrite them for you here on the show so you can get the coaching and tips that you need to crush your quotas. That's what this is all about.
That's right. That's right. And make sure to leave comments below on what you're wanting to learn from the show. We'll be following up with a guide here in the next couple of months that's going to have a lot of the kind of like lessons and rewrites that we've gone through so far with SDRescue. So definitely leave your thoughts below. We want to hear what you want to learn about, what you want to hear us talk about, what types of emails you want to see on future episodes.
Thanks, everybody.